Anthony Griffin's fingers tremble as he activates the bioscanner. The device hums to life, its soft blue glow illuminating the delicate flower-like appendages adorning his Binar research assistant's body. Karina, the assistant, stands motionless, her iridescent skin shimmering under the harsh laboratory lights. Neither of them realize that this routine examination is about to unlock a secret that will shake the foundations of Binar society and thrust humanity into an interstellar diplomatic crisis. The scanner beeps, and Anthony's eyes widen in disbelief. He double-checks the readings, his heart racing. "Karina," he says, his voice barely above a whisper, "I need to adjust the scanner. This may feel unusual." As Anthony recalibrates the device, Karina suddenly gasps. Her decorative appendages begin to pulse with a soft pink light. She looks at Anthony, her large almond-shaped eyes filled with confusion and something else, a primal hunger he's never seen in a Binar before. "What's happening to me?" Karina asks, her voice trembling. "I feel strange, warm, excited." Anthony's mind races as he processes the implications of what he's witnessing. The ornamental structures he's been studying aren't just for show, they're reproductive organs, and somehow his examination has awakened them from centuries of dormancy. Before he can explain, alarms blare throughout the research facility. The door to the lab slides open, revealing a squad of Binar security forces. Their leader, a tall, imposing figure, steps forward. "Human Anthony Griffin, you are hereby placed under house arrest by order of the Binar High Council," the security chief announces, his voice cold and authoritative. As Anthony is escorted from the lab, he catches glimpses of chaos erupting in the corridors. News of the discovery spreads like wildfire. Binar females crowd the hallways, their eyes locked on the human scientists and diplomats scattered throughout the facility. Some reach out, hoping for a touch that might awaken their own dormant biology. In the days that follow, Anthony finds himself at the center of a growing storm. The Binar government, fearful of the implications of his discovery, keeps him isolated in a luxurious but heavily guarded apartment. Through snippets of conversation and secretly accessed data streams, he learns of the turmoil gripping the planet. The Binar species has been facing a fertility crisis for generations, their population slowly dwindling. Now, with the revelation that humans might hold the key to unlocking their reproductive potential, society is fracturing. The High Council wants to control and study the phenomenon, while the general population sees humans as saviors, the solution to their species' survival. Earth's government demands Anthony's release, but the Binars refuse to let him go. As tensions escalate, human-Binar relations across the galaxy become strained. Some call for increased cooperation, while others advocate for complete separation. Trapped in his gilded cage, Anthony grapples with the personal ramifications of his inadvertent discovery. His growing feelings for Karina complicate matters further, as does the weight of ethical questions surrounding his involvement in Binar reproduction. As the diplomatic crisis deepens, Anthony knows he can't remain passive. The information he holds could reshape the future of two species. With determination born of desperation, he begins to plan his escape. He must reach the human embassy and share his findings before the Binar government can suppress the truth. In the dead of night, Anthony makes his move. Using improvised tools and the knowledge he's gleaned from his time on the Binar homeworld, he disables the security systems in his quarters. Heart pounding, he slips into the shadowy corridors, knowing that every step brings him closer to freedom, or capture. The fate of human-Binar relations hangs in the balance as Anthony races against time, his discovery threatening to either unite two species or tear them apart forever. Anthony's heart pounded as he slipped through the shadowy corridors, every sense on high alert. He had barely made it halfway to the facility's exit when a familiar voice whispered his name. "Anthony, this way!" He spun around to see Karina emerging from a hidden panel in the wall. Her iridescent skin glowed faintly in the darkness, her newly awakened appendages pulsing with a soft pink light. "Karina, what are you—" "No time," she hissed, grabbing his hand. "I know a way out. Follow me." Without hesitation, Anthony allowed Karina to pull him into the concealed passage. The panel slid shut behind them, plunging them into near-total darkness. Only the bioluminescent glow of Karina's skin provided any illumination as they hurried through a maze of narrow tunnels. "How did you find these passages?" Anthony asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Karina's large eyes glinted in the dim light. "They're part of an ancient network beneath the city. Most Binars have forgotten about them, but I've always been fascinated by our history." As they navigated the labyrinthine tunnels, Anthony felt a growing connection to Karina. Her bravery and quick thinking impressed him, and he found himself drawn to her in a way he hadn't expected. After what felt like hours of twisting and turning through the underground maze, they emerged into the cool night air on the outskirts of the Binar capital. The city's gleaming spires loomed in the distance, a stark contrast to the wild, untamed landscape surrounding them. "We need to get to the human embassy," Anthony said, scanning the horizon. Karina shook her head. "It's too dangerous. The authorities will be watching it closely. We need somewhere to hide and plan our next move." As if on cue, the night sky lit up with search beams, and the distant whine of hover vehicles filled the air. Anthony realized with a sinking feeling that their escape had been discovered. "I know someone who might help," Karina said urgently. "Dr. Alara Vox. She's a geneticist who's been advocating for interspecies cooperation. Her lab isn't far from here." With no better options, Anthony nodded, and they set off toward the city, keeping to the shadows and avoiding main thoroughfares. As they walked, Karina explained Dr. Vox's reputation for progressive thinking and her long-standing interest in solving the Binar fertility crisis. They reached Dr. Vox's laboratory just as the first hints of dawn were starting to color the sky. The building was a sleek, modern structure, nestled among a cluster of research facilities. Karina led Anthony to a side entrance and activated the comm panel. After a tense moment, a stern voice responded, "Who's there? Do you know what time it is?" "Dr. Vox, it's Karina from the Xenobiology department. I need your help. It's urgent." There was a pause, then the door slid open. Dr. Vox, a tall Binar with striking silver markings on her skin, ushered them inside quickly. Her eyes widened as she recognized Anthony. "You're the human everyone's looking for," she said, her voice a mix of surprise and intrigue. "Come, quickly. My private lab is secure." As they followed Dr. Vox through the facility, Anthony explained his discovery and the events that had unfolded. The geneticist listened intently, her expression growing more excited with each passing moment. "This is extraordinary," she said as they entered her lab. "The implications for our species, we must investigate further." Over the next few hours, Dr. Vox worked tirelessly, analyzing samples from both Anthony and Karina. Anthony assisted where he could, while Karina underwent a series of scans to monitor her ongoing transformation. As the sun rose higher in the sky, Dr. Vox called them over to her workstation, her eyes shining with excitement. "I've identified the mechanism," she announced. "It's a specific pheromone produced by humans. It triggers a cascade of hormonal changes in Binar females, activating dormant reproductive systems." Anthony's mind raced with the implications. "That explains why your previous attempts at artificial reproduction failed," he said. "You needed the human pheromone as a catalyst." Dr. Vox nodded enthusiastically. "Exactly. This discovery could be the key to saving our species." As they discussed the findings, Karina suddenly gasped, doubling over. Anthony rushed to her side, supporting her as she trembled. "What's happening?" he asked, panic edging into his voice. Dr. Vox quickly ran a scan. "Her transformation is accelerating. The changes to her reproductive system are progressing rapidly." Anthony held Karina close, feeling the heat radiating from her body. Her skin shimmered with intensifying patterns of light, and her newly awakened appendages curled and uncurled in rhythmic pulses. "I feel so strange," Karina whispered, her large eyes locking onto Anthony's. "But also alive, more than I've ever felt before." As Anthony comforted Karina, he became acutely aware of the growing attraction between them. The shared danger, the intensity of their experiences, and the profound nature of their discovery had forged a deep connection. Their moment of intimacy was interrupted by a sudden commotion outside the lab. Dr. Vox hurried to a monitor, her expression grave. "The news of your discovery has leaked," she said. "Binar females across the city are seeking out human contact. It's causing chaos." On the screen, they watched scenes of Binar females approaching human diplomats and tourists, their bodies beginning to glow with awakening. Law enforcement struggled to maintain order as crowds gathered around human-occupied buildings. "We need to act fast," Anthony said, his mind racing. "If we don't find a way to manage this, it could tear Binar society apart and destroy human-Binar relations." Dr. Vox nodded grimly. "I have contacts in the High Council. We need to present our findings directly to them and the Human Diplomatic Corps. It's the only way to prevent this situation from spiraling out of control." As they began to formulate a plan, a loud explosion rocked the building. Alarms blared, and the lab's security shutters slammed down. "What was that?" Karina asked, her voice trembling. Dr. Vox's fingers flew over her console. "A terrorist attack. A group calling themselves the Binar Purists. They're targeting human facilities across the city." Anthony's stomach churned with dread. The situation was escalating faster than they could have imagined. As they watched the chaos unfold on the monitors, a new alert flashed on the screen. "Security forces are converging on this area," Dr. Vox said, her voice tense. "They're led by Commander Zarak, one of the most hardline military leaders. He's been tasked with capturing you, Anthony, and suppressing information about the reproductive breakthrough." Anthony looked from Karina to Dr. Vox, purpose setting in. "We can't let them stop us. Too much is at stake. We need to find a way to reach the High Council and human ambassadors before it's too late." As the sound of approaching vehicles filled the air, they knew their window of opportunity was rapidly closing. With Binar society teetering on the brink of chaos and human-Binar relations hanging by a thread, Anthony, Karina, and Dr. Vox prepared to make their desperate bid for the Binar capital, carrying with them the knowledge that could change the fate of two species forever. As Anthony, Karina, and Dr. Vox huddled together, formulating their desperate plan to reach the High Council, the laboratory door slid open with a soft hiss. They tensed, ready to face Commander Zarek's forces, but instead found themselves looking at an unfamiliar human woman. "Dr. Lyra Zhen," she said, stepping inside and quickly securing the door behind her. "And I believe I have information that could change everything." Dr. Vox's eyes widened in recognition. "The geneticist from Earth's Xenobiology Institute?" Dr. Zhen nodded, her gaze sweeping over the group before settling on Anthony. "I've been conducting parallel research on human Binar biology, and I've made a breakthrough that could solve this crisis without requiring direct human Binar contact." Anthony felt a surge of hope. "What kind of breakthrough?" "I've discovered a way to synthesize the human pheromone responsible for activating Binar reproductive organs," Dr. Zhen explained, pulling out a datapad. "It's artificial, but it replicates the effects perfectly." As Dr. Zhen shared her findings, the implications became clear. This could be the compromise they needed, a solution that might satisfy both species and prevent further chaos. Their discussion was cut short by the sound of approaching vehicles. Commander Zarek's forces had arrived. "We need to move," Dr. Vox said, her voice tense. "There's a hidden exit through my private lab." Anthony's mind raced. They needed a distraction to cover their escape. His eyes fell on a rack of chemicals nearby, and an idea formed. "I can buy us some time," he said, grabbing several vials. "Get to the exit. I'll be right behind you." As the others hurried to the hidden door, Anthony mixed the chemicals with practiced efficiency. The result was a harmless but visually dramatic reaction, a billowing cloud of multicolored smoke that filled the main laboratory. Alarms blared as Anthony sprinted to join the others. They slipped through the concealed exit just as the main doors burst open. Commander Zarek's angry shouts muffled by the chaos they'd left behind. The group emerged into the cool night air, the city's outskirts stretching before them. They moved quickly, keeping to the shadows as they made their way toward the Binar capital. As they traveled, Karina's transformation continued to progress. Her skin pulsed with ever-changing patterns of light, and she stumbled occasionally, overwhelmed by the sensations coursing through her body. "Anthony," she gasped during one such moment, reaching for him. I can't." He caught her, supporting her weight. "I've got you," he murmured, their faces close. The attraction between them, intensified by their shared ordeal, crackled like electricity. Unable to resist any longer, they came together in a passionate embrace. Their kiss was urgent, desperate, a release of the tension that had been building since their first meeting. When they finally broke apart, both were breathless. "We should keep moving," Dr. Vox said gently, reminding them of the gravity of their situation. As they neared the capital's outskirts, a sleek hover vehicle intercepted them, cutting off their path. Anthony tensed, ready for a confrontation, but the door slid open to reveal a distinguished-looking Binar. "I am Counselor Nexus," he said, stepping out. "I represent a moderate faction within the High Council. We've been monitoring your progress and believe your research could be the key to resolving this crisis." Dr. Vox eyed him warily. "And you're offering us what exactly?" "Safe passage to the council chambers," Nexus replied. "In exchange, I want to be briefed on your findings before we arrive. Information is power, especially in times like these." With no better options, they agreed to Nexus's terms. As they sped toward the city center, Anthony watched the chaos unfold through the vehicle's tinted windows. Crowds of Binar females surrounded buildings housing humans, their bodies glowing with awakening. In other areas, violent clashes erupted between those seeking human contact and isolationist factions. Nexus listened intently as they summarized their discoveries, his expression growing more grave with each passing moment. "This is even more significant than we realized," he said as they approached the council building. "Be prepared for strong reactions from all sides." The council chambers were a scene of barely controlled chaos when they arrived. Representatives from various Binar factions filled the tiered seats, while human diplomats huddled together, looking uncertain. As Anthony and his allies presented their findings, including Dr. Zhen's breakthrough with synthetic pheromones, the chamber erupted into frenzied debate. "This is an abomination," shouted Sentinel Prime, leader of the isolationist faction. "We cannot allow human biology to dictate the future of our species." Others argued just as passionately for embracing the solution, citing the desperation of their dwindling population. The human diplomats watched the proceedings with growing concern, whispering among themselves about the potential consequences for interspecies relations. Just as it seemed a consensus might be forming, the chamber's main doors exploded inward. Commander Zarek stormed in, flanked by heavily armed security forces. "Arrest them!" he bellowed, pointing at Anthony and his companions. "They are a threat to Binar security and must be contained." The chamber descended into chaos. Council members and diplomats scattered, seeking cover from the armed intruders. In the confusion, Anthony lost sight of Dr. Vox and Dr. Zhen. He grabbed Karina's hand, pulling her toward a side exit. "We need to get out of here." They had barely made it into the corridor when a deafening explosion rocked the building. The floor beneath them buckled, and they tumbled into darkness as a section of the structure collapsed. Anthony coughed, dust filling his lungs as he regained consciousness. "Karina?" he called out, his voice hoarse. "I'm here," she replied weakly from nearby. As his eyes adjusted to the gloom, Anthony realized they were trapped in a partially collapsed section of the building. Debris blocked their way back to the council chambers, and the corridor ahead was dark and unfamiliar. "We need to find another way out," he said, helping Karina to her feet. They moved cautiously through the damaged structure, the sounds of chaos above growing fainter. As they rounded a corner, they found themselves facing a hidden elevator, its doors partially open. "This isn't on any of the building plans I've seen," Karina said, her brow furrowed. Anthony peered into the elevator shaft. "It goes down, way down. This might be our only way out." With no other options, they squeezed through the damaged doors and began their descent into the unknown depths beneath the Binar capital. As the elevator creaked downward, Anthony couldn't shake the feeling that they were about to uncover something that would change everything they thought they knew about the Binar fertility crisis. The elevator shuddered to a stop, its doors opening to reveal a vast, dimly lit chamber filled with advanced scientific equipment. Rows of stasis pods lined the walls, each containing a Binar in various stages of development. "What is this place?" Karina whispered, her eyes wide with shock. Anthony moved to a nearby console, his fingers flying over the controls. "It's some kind of secret research facility," he said, scanning through the data. "They've been experimenting with cloning, genetic manipulation. Karina, they've been trying to solve the fertility crisis for decades, in secret." As they delved deeper into the facility's database, the true scope of the conspiracy began to unfold. The Bynarr government had known about the potential compatibility with humans for years, but had suppressed the information, fearing the social upheaval it might cause. "We need to get this information out," Anthony said, his voice tight with urgency. "The Bynarr people and the galactic community need to know the truth." A distant explosion reminded them of the chaos above. They needed to find a way out of the secret facility, reunite with their allies, and expose the hidden truth to both Bynarrs and humans. As they searched for an exit, Anthony and Karina knew that the fate of two species now rested on their ability to unravel this conspiracy and find a solution that could bridge the divide between isolation and integration. Integration and find a solution that would satisfy both species. As they searched for an exit from the underground facility, a faint rumble echoed through the chamber. Dust and debris rained down from the ceiling, reminding them of the precarious situation above. "Over here!" Karina called out, her voice tinged with urgency. She'd discovered a narrow maintenance shaft tucked away behind a row of stasis pods. "It looks like it leads up to the surface." Anthony rushed to her side, examining the rusted ladder that disappeared into the darkness above. "It's our best shot. Let's go." They began their ascent, the metal rungs creaking under their weight. The shaft was claustrophobic, barely wide enough for them to fit through. As they climbed, the sounds of conflict grew louder, punctuated by occasional explosions that sent tremors through the structure. After what felt like an eternity, they reached a hatch at the top of the shaft. Anthony pushed against it with all his strength, feeling it give way inch by inch. With a final heave, the hatch swung open, and they emerged into the chaos of the partially collapsed council building. Smoke filled the air, stinging their eyes and throats. They stumbled through the wreckage, narrowly avoiding falling debris and sparking electrical wires. The once grand halls of Bynarr governance were now a maze of twisted metal and shattered stone. As they rounded a corner, they nearly collided with two familiar figures. "Dr. Vox, Dr. Zhen!" Anthony exclaimed, relief washing over him. The two scientists looked disheveled but unharmed. Dr. Vox's eyes widened as she took in their appearance. "Where have you been? We've been searching everywhere." "There's no time to explain here," Karina interjected, her skin pulsing with agitated patterns of light. "We need to get somewhere safe. We've discovered something huge." Dr. Zhen nodded, her expression grim. "The nearest secure location is the Central Medical Center. We can regroup there and analyze whatever you found." The group made their way through the city streets, dodging pockets of violence between humans and Bynarrs. The normally orderly metropolis had descended into chaos, with security forces struggling to maintain control. Upon reaching the medical center, they found it overwhelmed with casualties from the council building attack. Injured Bynarrs and humans filled every available space, their cries of pain echoing through the corridors. Dr. Vox took charge, her authoritative tone cutting through the din. "I need a private room immediately. This is a matter of planetary security." A harried-looking nurse led them to a small laboratory on an upper floor, away from the main triage area. As soon as the door closed behind them, Anthony connected his data pad to the lab's central computer, bringing up the files they discovered in the underground facility. "The Bynarr government has known about the human compatibility for years," he explained, his fingers flying over the controls. "They've been conducting secret experiments, trying to solve the fertility crisis without involving humans." As the others pored over the data, the door to the lab slid open. A tall, imposing Bynarr male entered, his features strikingly similar to Dr. Vox's. "Kale," Dr. Vox gasped, her usually composed demeanor slipping. "What are you doing here?" "Hello, sister," Dr. Kale Vox replied, his voice cold. "I've been tracking your movements since the council building attack. I should have known you'd be involved in this mess." Anthony tensed, ready for a confrontation, but Kale raised his hands in a placating gesture. "I'm not here to fight," he said. "I'm here to offer information. I've been part of the secret research program, and I know things that could help dedication this crisis. But I want immunity in exchange." The room fell silent as they processed this unexpected development. Finally, Dr. Vox spoke. "We're listening. Over the next hour, Kale revealed the true extent of the Binar fertility crisis, a genetic mutation caused by long-term exposure to a rare element in the planet's crust, had been slowly rendering the species infertile. The human pheromone acted as a catalyst, temporarily reversing the mutation's effects. The government kept it secret to prevent panic, Kale explained. But now, with the awakening spreading, we're on the brink of societal collapse. As they discussed the implications of this revelation, an alert flashed on the lab's communication panel. It was a citywide announcement from Commander Zarek, implementing a full lockdown and intensifying the search for Anthony and his allies. "We need to move fast," Anthony said, his mind racing. "Dr. Zhen, your synthetic pheromone research could be the key. If we can create a large-scale treatment, we might be able to address the fertility crisis without direct human contact." Dr. Zhen nodded, her eyes lighting up with the spark of scientific challenge. "It's possible, but we'd need significant resources and time. And we'd need to address the root cause," Karina added. "Find a way to remove the mutagenic element from the environment." As they began to formulate a plan, another alert came through. This time, it was a private message from Counselor Nexus. "The situation is deteriorating rapidly," Nexus's holographic form reported. "The isolationists are gaining ground, using the recent violence to push for complete severance of human-binar relations. We need your findings and a viable solution presented to the Emergency Council within the next 12 hours, or we risk losing everything we've worked for." The gravity of the situation settled over the room. They had half a day to compile their evidence, refine their treatment proposal, and prepare a presentation that could change the course of two species. "We need to split up," Anthony said, taking charge. "Karina and I will focus on compiling the evidence of the government cover-up. Dr. Vox, Dr. Zhen, and Kale, you work on finalizing the treatment proposal. We'll reconvene in 6 hours to put it all together." As they threw themselves into their tasks, the hours flew by in a blur of data analysis and scientific theorizing. Anthony and Karina worked side by side, their shared ordeal and growing feelings for each other lending an intensity to their efforts. During a brief moment of respite, they found themselves alone in a corner of the lab. The air between them crackled with unspoken tension. "Anthony," Karina began, her voice soft, "if we don't succeed—" He silenced her with a gentle kiss, pouring all his hope and dedication into the gesture. When they parted, their eyes locked, a wordless understanding passing between them. The moment was shattered by an urgent exclamation from Kyle. "We've got a problem," he said, his face pale as he read a message on his personal communicator. "Zarek's found us. He's on his way with a security team." The room erupted into frantic activity as they gathered their research and equipment. They had mere minutes to escape before Zarek's forces arrived, and the fate of human-binar relations hung in the balance. As they prepared to make their daring escape, Anthony's mind raced with the challenges ahead. They needed to evade capture, navigate a city in turmoil, and somehow make it to the Emergency Council meeting in time to prevent a complete breakdown between their species. With Karina by his side and their allies at the ready, he took a deep breath and prepared to face whatever lay ahead. With a nod to his companions, Anthony led the way out of the lab and into the chaotic corridors of the medical center. As they rushed through the building, alarms blared and panicked staff members darted past them. The group had just reached the main entrance when a familiar voice called out from behind. "Wait, we can help you!" Anthony spun around to see a young Binar woman approaching, flanked by a small group of determined-looking citizens. Her skin pulsed with intricate patterns of light, conveying a mix of urgency and sincerity. "I'm Zara," she said, her voice steady despite the chaos around them. "We've heard rumors about the government's secrets. We want to help you get to the Emergency Council meeting safely." Anthony exchanged quick glances with Karina and the others. Time was running out, and they needed all the help they could get. "How?" Dr. Vox asked, her tone skeptical but hopeful. Zara gestured to a nearby maintenance hatch. "There's a network of underground tunnels beneath the city. We can guide you through them to reach the council chambers undetected." With the sounds of Zarek's approaching security forces echoing down the corridor, Anthony made a split-second decision. "Lead the way," he said. They followed Zara and her group into the narrow maintenance shaft, descending into the dimly lit tunnels below. The air was thick and musty, filled with the hum of distant machinery. As they navigated the labyrinthine passages, Anthony found himself beside Karina, their shoulders brushing in the confined space. "Are you okay?" he whispered, noting the tension in her face. Karina's bioluminescent patterns flickered softly in the darkness. "I'm fine," she replied, her voice barely audible. "It's just, I never imagined I'd be part of something like this. Hiding in tunnels, running from my own government." Anthony reached out and squeezed her hand, feeling a surge of warmth at the contact. "We're in this together," he assured her. "Whatever happens, we'll face it as a team." As they continued through the tunnels, Zara explained how her group had been monitoring the growing unrest on the planet. "More and more Binars are questioning the official narrative," she said. "We've been working to uncover the truth and push for transparency." After what felt like hours of tense silence punctuated by hushed conversations, Zara finally announced that they were nearing their destination. As they climbed a narrow stairwell leading to the surface, Anthony's heart raced with anticipation and anxiety. They emerged from a hidden hatch into an alleyway near the council chambers. The sounds of the city in turmoil surrounded them, distant shouts, sirens, and the occasional explosion. As they rounded the corner towards the main entrance, they found their path blocked by a small group of armed guards. "Halt!" one of the guards shouted, raising his weapon. In that moment, Anthony locked eyes with Dr. Cale Vox. Without a word, they sprung into action. Anthony ducked low, tackling one guard at the knees, while Cale delivered a precise strike to another's solar plexus. The rest of the team joined the fray, working together to subdue the remaining guards without causing serious harm. As the last guard slumped to the ground, Anthony and Cale stood face to face, breathing heavily. A look of mutual respect passed between them, born from the heat of shared combat. "Nice moves for a scientist," Cale said, a hint of a smile on his face. Anthony nodded. "You're not so bad yourself for a government insider." With no time to waste, they rushed into the council chambers. The emergency meeting was already in full swing, with Sentinel Prime, the leader of the isolationist faction, delivering an impassioned speech. "And so we must sever all ties with the humans before it's too late." Sentinel Prime's voice boomed through the chamber. "Their influence is a poison that will destroy our way of life." Anthony and his team burst through the doors, causing a ripple of shock to sweep through the assembled council members. "That's not true," Anthony shouted, his voice cutting through the murmurs of surprise. "We have evidence that will change everything you think you know about the fertility crisis." As the council members reacted with a mix of outrage and curiosity, Anthony and his team quickly set up their presentation. Dr. Zhen and Dr. Vox began explaining the complex science behind the fertility issue and their proposed solution, while Karina and Anthony presented the evidence of the government's long-standing cover-up. The chamber erupted into chaos as counselors argued and debated the implications of this new information. Suddenly, the doors flew open once again, and Commander Zarak marched in with a contingent of heavily armed security forces. "Arrest them!" Zarak bellowed, pointing at Anthony and his allies. "They are enemies of the state." But before his men could move, Counselor Nexus stood up, his voice ringing with authority. "Stand down, Commander. By the power vested in me by this council, I order you to cease this action immediately." A tense standoff ensued, with Zarak's forces hesitating between their commander's orders and the counselor's command. The air crackled with tension as Anthony and his team stood their ground, the fate of two species hanging in the balance. As the council grappled with the shocking revelations, reports began pouring in from across the planet. The news of the fertility crisis and potential human involvement had leaked, sparking widespread unrest. Riots were erupting in major cities, with some Binars demanding immediate access to human pheromone treatments, while others called for the expulsion of all humans from their world. Realizing the gravity of the situation, the council agreed to an emergency vote on Anthony's proposal. As the voting process began, Anthony found himself pulled aside by Karina. They ducked into a small alcove, away from the chaos of the chamber. "Anthony," Karina said, her voice trembling slightly, "I need to tell you something. In case this doesn't work out." He silenced her with a kiss, pulling her close. The world around them seemed to fade away as they clung to each other, their shared experiences and growing feelings culminating in this passionate moment. When they finally parted, Anthony rested his forehead against hers. "We're going to make this work," he said softly, "for both our peoples." As they rejoined the others, Dr. Zhen and Dr. Vox were huddled over a data pad, their expressions a mix of excitement and concern. "We've made a breakthrough," Dr. Zhen announced. "We can enhance the effectiveness of the synthetic pheromone by incorporating trace amounts of the mutagenic element responsible for the fertility issues. But," Dr. Vox added, "it will require extremely careful extraction and handling. It's not without risk." Before they could discuss this development further, Anthony received an urgent message from Earth's government. The human authorities, now aware of the situation, were preparing to send a diplomatic envoy to oversee the implementation of any agreed-upon solution. The council chamber buzzed with renewed intensity as the implications of increased human involvement were debated. Anthony watched as the counselors argued, knowing that the next few hours would determine the future of human-binar relations. As the deliberations continued, Anthony couldn't help but feel the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. The challenges ahead were immense: implementing a planet-wide fertility treatment, managing interspecies relations, and dealing with opposition from extremist factions on both sides. He looked around at his team, Karina, Dr. Zhen, Dr. Vox, and even the once antagonistic Kale, and felt a surge of tenacity. Whatever came next, they would face it together, for the sake of both their peoples. Species. The council chamber erupted into a flurry of activity as the vote concluded. Anthony held his breath, his heart pounding as he waited for the results. Finally, Councillor Nexus stood, his face a mask of calm authority. "The council has reached a decision," he announced. "We will proceed with the implementation of the human-assisted fertility treatment." A collective sigh of relief swept through Anthony's team, but there was no time to celebrate. The real work was just beginning. In the days that followed, a whirlwind of activity engulfed the capital city. Anthony, Dr. Zhen, and Dr. Vox worked tirelessly to establish a temporary research facility, commandeering an abandoned manufacturing plant on the outskirts of the city. The cavernous space quickly filled with state-of-the-art equipment, a mix of human and binar technology working in tandem. Karina, her body now fully embracing its awakened biology, threw herself into her new role as liaison between the human scientists and binar volunteers. Her skin pulsed with intricate patterns of light as she moved from station to station, translating complex scientific jargon and easing the concerns of nervous binar participants. As the team delved deeper into the production of the synthetic pheromone treatment, they encountered their first major obstacle. The extraction of the mutagenic element from the planet's crust proved far more challenging than anticipated. "The element is highly unstable," Dr. Zhen explained, frowning at a holographic display of the planet's geological layers. "Our current mining techniques are too crude. We risk triggering seismic events if we're not careful." Anthony ran a hand through his hair, his mind racing. "We need to develop a new approach, something more precise, less invasive." As they brainstormed potential solutions, a binar engineer named Zix approached them, his eyes wide with excitement. "I may have an idea," he said, his voice trembling slightly. "What if we used focused sonic pulses to vibrate the element loose from the surrounding rock?" The suggestion sparked a flurry of activity as the team worked to develop and test this new mining technique. Days blurred into nights as they refined the process, pushing the boundaries of both human and binar technology. Their efforts paid off in an unexpected way. As they began extracting the mutagenic element, they uncovered vast deposits of a previously unknown mineral. The discovery sent shockwaves through both human and binar communities. "This mineral could revolutionize our energy production," Dr. Vox mused, examining a sample under a microscope. "Its properties are unlike anything we've ever seen." News of the mineral discovery spread rapidly, catching the attention of mining corporations from both species. Within days, representatives began arriving on the planet, their eyes gleaming with the promise of profit. As Anthony and his team focused on their work, they remained largely unaware of the political storm brewing around them. Commander Zarek, though officially removed from his position, had not given up his fight. He began holding clandestine meetings with hardline military factions, spreading whispers of human duplicity. "They claim to be here to help," Zarek said to a group of sympathetic officers, his voice low and urgent. "But look at how quickly they've moved to claim our resources. This treatment is nothing more than a ploy to weaken us, to make us dependent on them." His words found fertile ground among those who feared change and outside influence. Soon, isolated acts of sabotage began to target the research facility. Equipment malfunctioned mysteriously, supply shipments went missing, and threatening messages appeared on computer terminals. Counselor Nexus, aware of the growing threat, assigned a security detail to protect Anthony and his team. Among the guards was Lyra, a skilled Binar tactical expert with sharp eyes and quick reflexes. As Lyra integrated herself into the daily routines of the facility, she found herself drawn to Anthony's leadership and drive. She began asking him questions about Earth, human customs, and his experiences on her world. "Your species is fascinating," Lyra said one evening, as she accompanied Anthony on a routine check of the facility's perimeter. "The way you adapt, the diversity of your cultures, it's so different from our unity." Anthony smiled, appreciating her curiosity. "We have our strengths and weaknesses, just like the Binars. That's why I believe our two species can accomplish so much together." Their growing friendship did not go unnoticed by Karina. As she watched Anthony and Lyra talking animatedly over dinner in the facility's canteen, she felt an unfamiliar twinge in her chest. Her skin flickered with patterns of uncertainty, and was it jealousy? Karina tried to push these feelings aside, focusing instead on her work. But as she caught her reflection in a polished surface, she couldn't help but notice how different she looked now. Her once uniform skin now pulsed with complex bioluminescent patterns, a visible sign of her changing biology. She wondered, not for the first time, where she truly belonged in this new world taking shape around her. As the first batch of treatments neared completion, tensions in the city reached a boiling point. A group of desperate Binar females, led by the rights activist Zara, gathered outside the research facility. Their voices rose in a chorus of demands and pleas. "We can't wait any longer," Zara shouted, her words amplified by the crowd around her. "Our people are dying. We need the treatment now." Anthony stood at a window, watching the growing crowd with a mix of sympathy and anxiety. He knew the treatment wasn't fully tested, that distributing it prematurely could have unforeseen consequences, but he also understood the desperation driving these women to action. As he weighed his options, a commotion erupted at the facility's main entrance. A group of protesters had broken through the outer security perimeter and were attempting to force their way inside. Anthony's mind raced. He had to make a decision, and quickly. The fate of the Binar people, the success of the treatment program, and the future of human-Binar relations all hung in the balance. Whatever choice he made now would have far-reaching consequences, and there would be no going back. With a deep breath, Anthony made his decision. "Let them in," he said, his voice firm, "but only a small group. We need to show them what we're doing here." As Lyra and her security team carefully managed the influx of protesters, Anthony gathered his core team. He looked at each of them in turn, Karina, Dr. Jen, Dr. Vox, and the others, who had worked tirelessly alongside him. "We've been holding back," he said, his tone grave. "There's something you all need to know." In the tense silence that followed, Anthony revealed the truth about the permanent treatment solution. He explained how Earth's government had ordered them to withhold this information, fearing the loss of leverage over the Binar people. The room erupted into a cacophony of shock and outrage. Dr. Vox's usually calm demeanor cracked as he pounded his fist on the table. "How could you keep this from us?" he demanded. Karina placed a hand on Anthony's arm, her skin pulsing with a pattern of support and concern. "We need to tell the council," she said softly. "It's the right thing to do." Anthony nodded, the weight of his decision settling on his shoulders. "I know, and I'll face whatever consequences come from Earth. But the Binars deserve to know the truth." As they prepared to contact the council, alarms blared throughout the facility. Security feeds showed chaos erupting in the capital city. Commander Zarek, his face contorted with rage, appeared on every screen. "Citizens of Binar," he bellowed, I am taking control to protect our people from human deceit. All alien influences will be purged from our society. Anthony and his team watched in horror as Zarek's forces moved through the city, rounding up humans and their Binar allies. The research facility's defenses engaged automatically, blast shields slamming down over windows and doors. We need to secure the treatment data, Dr. Jen said urgently, her fingers flying over a console. If Zarek gets his hands on it, Anthony nodded grimly. Do it, and destroy anything that could be weaponized. We can't let this fall into the wrong hands. As the team scrambled to protect their work, Anthony received an incoming transmission from Ambassador Elena Reyes. Her face appeared on a nearby screen, her expression a mix of anger and disappointment. Anthony, what have you done? She demanded. You've betrayed Earth's trust and jeopardized our entire mission here. I'm doing what's right, Anthony shot back. These people are dying, Elena. We can't play politics with their lives. Before she could respond, the transmission cut out abruptly. The facility shook as explosions rocked the perimeter. They're breaching the outer defenses, Lyra reported, her voice tense. We don't have much time. Anthony turned to Dr. Jen. Is the data secure? She nodded, her face pale but determined. Transmitted to an off-world location. They can't get to it now. As Zarek's forces drew closer, Lyra approached Anthony, her eyes darting to the corners of the room. There's another way out, she said in a low voice. Through the waste disposal system. It's not on any official blueprints. Anthony looked at her in surprise. How do you know about this? A ghost of a smile crossed Lyra's face. I have my sources. It's how the resistance has been moving undetected. With no time to question further, Anthony gathered his team. Everyone, grab what you can carry. We're leaving. They moved swiftly through the facility, the sounds of fighting growing louder behind them. Lyra led them to a maintenance hatch hidden behind a bank of equipment. As they pried it open, the acrid smell of the waste system hit them. It's not going to be pleasant, Lyra warned, but it's our best chance. One by one, they dropped into the narrow tunnel. Anthony went last, pulling the hatch closed behind him. Just as the door to the room burst open, Zarek's soldiers pouring in. The group moved as quickly as they could through the cramped, foul-smelling passages. The sounds of pursuit echoed distantly behind them, spurring them on despite their exhaustion. After what felt like hours, they emerged into a dimly lit underground chamber. A group of figures melted out of the shadows, weapons raised. Wait! A familiar voice called out. Zara, the Binar rights activist, stepped forward. They're with us. As Zara's followers lowered their weapons, Anthony and his team sagged with relief. They had escaped Zarek's immediate grasp, but the real fight was just beginning. Zara led them deeper into the Resistance's hidden base, explaining the situation as they went. Zarek's coup has thrown the planet into chaos, she said grimly. But not everyone supports him. We've been gathering allies, both Binar and human, who want to see him stopped. As they entered a larger chamber filled with makeshift equipment and determined-looking rebels, Anthony knew their next moves would be crucial. They had the truth about the fertility treatment, a growing resistance movement, and a planet on the brink of civil war. He looked at Karina, seeing his own mix of fear and persistence reflected in her bioluminescent patterns. Whatever came next, they would face it together, for the sake of both their peoples. All right, Anthony said, addressing the assembled group. Let's figure out how we're going to take back this planet. Planet. Anthony's words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of their situation. The assembled group of rebels, both human and Binar, leaned in closer, eager to hear his plan. Before Anthony could continue, Karina stepped forward, her skin pulsing with a pattern that conveyed both purpose and hope. We need to tell everyone the truth, she said, her voice steady. About the fertility treatment, about Zarek's lies, about everything. Zara nodded in agreement. We have access to the planetary communication network. We can broadcast a message to every Binar on the planet. Anthony's eyes lit up. That's it. We'll use the truth as our weapon. But we need to do more than just talk. We need to show them. Over the next few hours, Anthony, Karina, and the resistance leaders worked feverishly to put together a plan. They would combine a planet-wide broadcast with strategic strikes against Zarek's key installations. As dawn broke over the Binar capital, the resistance made its move. Zara and her team infiltrated the central communications hub, overriding the security protocols with a series of complex algorithms. Simultaneously, Lyra led a group of fighters to disable Zarek's defensive perimeter. Anthony and Karina found themselves in a makeshift studio, facing a camera that would soon broadcast their message to every corner of the planet. As the red light blinked on, Anthony took a deep breath and began to speak. "People of Binar, my name is Anthony Chen. I came to your world as a scientist, hoping to help, but I've made mistakes. We've all made mistakes. The fertility treatment we developed isn't just a temporary solution, it's permanent." Karina stepped into view, her skin glowing with a pattern that expressed sincerity and unity. "I am Karina, one of your own. I stand here as living proof of what humans and Binars can achieve together. The treatment works, it's safe, and it's your right to have access to it." As they spoke, images began to flash across screens planet-wide. Data from the research facility, testimonials from treated Binars, evidence of Zarek's deception, the truth laid bare for all to see. The effect was immediate and electric. All across the planet, Binars watched in stunned silence, then erupted into discussion and debate. In the streets of the capital, crowds began to gather, their voices rising in a chorus of anger and hope. Zarak, caught off guard by the broadcast, scrambled to regain control. He ordered his forces to shut down the transmission, but it was too late. The message had spread like wildfire. As the day wore on, reports began flooding in from all corners of the planet. Binar citizens were rising up, overwhelming Zarek's forces through sheer numbers and perseverance. Military units, seeing the truth of the situation, began to defect en masse. Counselor Nexus, who had been in hiding since Zarek's coup, emerged to coordinate with the resistance. His calm, authoritative presence helped to steady the chaos that threatened to engulf the planet. Anthony and Karina found themselves at the heart of the uprising, moving through the streets of the capital alongside Lyra and a mixed group of human and Binar fighters. They pushed towards the central command center, where Zarek had barricaded himself with his remaining loyal forces. As they approached the imposing structure, the sound of weapons fire filled the air. Zarek's defenders were putting up a fierce resistance, but it was clear they were outnumbered and outmatched. Lyra, her tactical expertise shining through, directed the assault with precision. "We need to breach the main entrance," she shouted over the din of battle. "If we can get inside, we can end this." Anthony nodded, his heart racing as he took cover behind a fallen piece of debris. He looked at Karina, her skin now pulsing with a pattern he recognized as a mix of fear and purpose. "Are you ready?" he asked. Karina's response was cut short by a sudden explosion that rocked the ground beneath them. Through the smoke and chaos, they saw a figure emerging from the command center's entrance. It was Zarek, his face contorted with rage and desperation. "You think you've won?" he snarled, holding up a small device. "I still have one last card to play. This experimental weapon will mutate every Binar within range. If I can't rule this planet, I'll watch it burn." As Zarek's finger hovered over the device's activation switch, time seemed to slow down. Anthony's mind raced, searching for a solution. But before anyone could act, a blur of motion caught everyone by surprise. Dr. Cale Vox, who had been working quietly in the background since their escape from the research facility, sprinted towards Zarek. With a look of steadfast perseverance, he tackled the rogue commander to the ground. "No more," Vox growled, wrestling with Zarek for control of the device. "No more lives ruined by our arrogance." In the struggle, the device activated, releasing a pulse of energy that enveloped both Vox and Zarek. The assembled crowd watched in horror as the two Binar's forms began to twist and change, the mutagenic weapon taking its terrible toll. As the energy dissipated, Vox and Zarek lay motionless on the ground, their bodies permanently altered by the weapon's effects. The sacrifice was clear. Dr. Vox had given his life to prevent a catastrophe, redeeming himself in his final moments. The shock of Vox's actions seemed to break the spell of violence that had gripped the area. Zarek's remaining forces, seeing their leader fallen, began to lay down their weapons. The command center's defenses powered down, its doors sliding open in surrender. Anthony and Karina, still reeling from the rapid turn of events, stepped forward. As they entered the command center, they knew the hardest part of their journey was just beginning. The Binar people were free from Zarek's oppression, but the work of rebuilding trust and fostering true cooperation between humans and Binars lay ahead. As they stood in the heart of what had been Zarek's stronghold, Anthony turned to Karina, his eyes reflecting the mix of emotions coursing through him. "What now?" he asked softly. Karina's skin pulsed with a pattern that spoke of hope and grit. "Now," she said, her voice steady, "we build the future. Together."
If you finished this story, please subscribe and like the video. Then leave a comment that says, "I liked the story," and I will heart every single one of them. It really helps me. Thank you for your time.